You're watching the free version of Silhouette Essentials. For projects and footage, head to BorisFX.com for the premium download. Hello again, this is exercise 7, and this is the final part, and some might say the most important part as well, where we're going to be looking at outputting our image. So we've got our effect how we want it, and at the bottom here we have an output node. The output node is fairly straightforward. We choose what format we want to take this out to. If we want to take it out to a QuickTime movie, we can choose GStreamer. I'll pop into options here and we can just use one of the presets to take this to ProRes, and I'll close that. And then we choose where we're going to take it to. I'm going to go into my file and let's just quickly find our output folder. And I'm going to call this one 07 complete. And we can choose to take out RGB, alpha and depth. Depending on what format we're taking them out to, we could take everything out at once, but ProRes 422 is just color. So I can either take out RGB, alpha or depth. So if I choose these as well, I can get actually multiple outputs happening simultaneously. But it would basically be choosing between taking out the alpha channel or taking out the RGB channels, because 422 doesn't support an alpha channel. 4x4 does though. We don't have depth, so let's just turn that off. And let's hit render and see what happens. It's going to ask us what we want to do. Do we want to render out just the selected output node? We've only got one, which is also selected, so that's fine. And everything else is good, so I'm just going to hit render. And it's going to give me an error message. There are no output nodes to render. And this can be a little bit of a confusing message to get, because you go, well, actually, there is an output node to render. I can see it right here. What Silhouette really means is that there's no valid output node to render. It means we're missing something in the node tree. And if we're working with effects that need multiple inputs, it's usually going to be that. And we have one of those right here. It's our wipe clouds. It's our transition. Our transition needs 2 inputs, and we've only given it 1 input. Now this works when we're just previewing it through, which is why I was kind of happy just to leave it there. But if we're trying to output it, it's going to get a little bit kind of angry at us. So, I mean, what do we do here? We do need to have another input, but we also don't want it to have any alpha. If I just repeated my transform in here, that doesn't work. It does 2 things. It fills in the data that I don't want again, because obviously we're just wiping from the same image, but it also pushes my data up because it's now automatically padding the image out to take into account this transform. So when we transform something in Silhouette, the pixels don't just disappear somewhere. They are still available so that we can transform it back at a later stage. And that's sort of what we're seeing here. Let's take a moment to just say why this jump is happening. Not all filters handle this area outside the viewer the same way. And we'll be talking about domain of definition, or DOD, in a moment, as this is what handles those extra pixels. Suffice to say that the Sapphire and Mocha filters are not DOD aware. So they're handling this area differently. When we're not using Sapphire or Mocha, Silhouette deals with different size DODs seamlessly, and you can render out without thinking about it. But because Sapphire and Mocha are not DOD aware, we have to do something a bit different. But it's okay, because Silhouette has the tools ready for us. So we've got 2 things we need to fix. The first is we need to make our input 1, our from image, transparent. And that's really simple. If I come over to my composite here, I've got an effect called swap channels. And if I bring that in fact, let's bring that over here and then pipe it in so we can see that a bit easier. Let's just move that over here. So the swap channels lets me decide what's going on within these channels. So I can just set this to black and everything to black. which means we've just got a transparent image. So if we come back into our wipe clouds now, again, we're wiping in from transparent, so we don't have that fill coming on here at all. So that's half of the problem fixed. So that's very nice. Let's find space to slot this in. Whoop, there we go. Lovely. All right. But we've still got the issue of this being pushed up. So something along here is making our image bigger than the 1920 by 1080 that it started off as. And if we look down the wire here, our Math Composite node has everything sat in the right place still. And if we go to our Spotlight, everything's sat in the right place there. But when we pop into Color Fuse, it's expanded out the image at this point. So let's take a look at what's going on here. I'm going to go up to the top in the viewer here and turn on my ROI thing here. This stands for region of interest. And it's showing us three different things. It's showing us our session size. So this is the size we set up our session up for, 1920 by 1080. It's showing us something called DOD. And DOD stands for Domain of Definition. And we can see that this is bigger than 1920 by 1080. So something along the way is expanding out our frame. And we can see the region of interest is 1920 by 1080, which is right. So let's take a look through the node tree and see which one is actually expanding our DOD outwards. So if I take a look at my arm roto here, my DOD is set to 1920 by 1080, 00. But if we hop over to the other side, go hold, blur, that's all fine. And then we have transform coming in. And the transform is moving that DOD because it's expanding. We're going to have a little look here. So it's expanding the overall canvas that we have so that we're not cutting out any pixels. And that's fine. And let's keep moving down here. So we go down here and go down here. We can still see, and let's just zoom out a little bit so we can see everything here. As we go, as we move down again, color correct, boom. Everything here is still keeping in those pixels in case we want to move those back in later. We go over to the other side. The alpha composite is bringing our DOD back into where it needs to be. And if we go into Math Composite, our DOD is obviously the same as it was with the power mesh. So what can we do here? Well, let's bring in another node to limit the DOD back to 1920 by 1080. And we'll do this after Math Composite. So with Math Composite selected, I'm going to hit the tab key and just type in DOD. Well, I can see in my viewer here, because we're on a DOD node, this is now green. So if I bring this in and up here, well, let's just limit this to 19, type it in 1920 by 1080. Thank you very much. Our domain of definition is back into the session size. So we come into Spotlight, take a look, DOD is now 1920 by 1080. Let's go back to the DOD, just go up to the top of the trees and just disable that for a second. And you see that being pushed out. So by defining the domain of definition again after Math Composite, we're making sure that when we feed this into other effects, we're getting the right frame size that we need. Let's close up the ROI, hit F to fit to viewer again. Just trace this down again now. There we go. And let's come back into our output and let's see what happens when we try to hit render now. So render, leave it exactly the same as it was previously. And now we get the lovely little render screen as it goes through and renders out our footage. And I think this is a really important lesson, not just in figuring out what that error message was, but also in diagnosing any problems that we have in our node tree. because most of the time, those sort of jumps can just be fixed with a well-placed DoD node, just to tell a silhouette to just deal with the image at the session size again. Or in fact, any size that you want, but in this case, the session size is what we needed. And with our output rendered, we can take one final look. Hopefully you've enjoyed taking this silhouette trip with me on this particular project. We've actually covered quite a lot of topics. Not only have we looked at some silhouette essentials, we've learned some good tricks with Roto and the different motion trackers that we have available in Silhouette, including the point trackers, the planar tracker, and Mocha's own tracker. And we've also seen how we can expand and extend that and use that tracking data much later on in our process using the data ports, with the data ports also being absolutely instrumental in letting us use Mocha Pro Power Mesh data directly inside of Silhouette. And don't forget, we've also had some nice little compositing tricks, like using the crop tool and the alpha composite tool to blend different alpha channels together to give us the result that we actually want. Thanks so much for joining me in this Silhouette Getting Started with Compositing course. If you'd like to learn more about Silhouette, we do have many more courses and individual tutorials available directly on the BorisFX website. Silhouette provides a very deep set of tools that can seem a little bit intimidating at the start, but once you get the hang of it, you can see how straightforward it is to start throwing lots of nodes together into the same tree. And if you keep yourself organized, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you to get lost in the process. And obviously, I encourage everyone to download the source and project files themselves and give it a go and enjoy your Silhouette journey. Thanks again. My name is Ben Brownlee for BorisFX. Bye for now.